I want to explain the why, because oftentimes I mention, that we should use CSS classes primarily to target and modify things, and I'm often met with some confusion as to that doesn't make sense. I mean, if I use my ID, then it'll, I can, target my element and make my change. Well, here's something that if you're not as familiar with CSS, you might not be aware of this vehicle or this methodology that is the selector specificity. Selector specificity, it's basically the mechanism that your browser uses to resolve conflicts between two selectors that are trying to modify the same property. So, for example, if I have selector A that is saying that the font should be red, and I have selector B, which is saying that the font should be green, both are valid selectors. One says it should be red, one says it should be green. Well, how does the browser resolve that? Well, the way that this works is it's a lot like, different selectors get a different score or a different rank, and that is based on their specificity. So really quickly, let's take a look at that. I'm using Visual Studio Code here. One of the things that I like about Visual Studio Code is that it allows me to quickly change the language that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and change my language mode over to CSS. And now it's going to give me all sorts of helpful insights to CSS. And I'm going to write a selector, and I'm going to call it my class. And I'm going to write another selector, and I'm going to call it my ID. Okay. When I mouse over this class, you can see that it's giving me a selector specificity, and it's giving me a score of 0, 1, 0. And the way that this works is that your browser will start at the leftmost side and look for the biggest number. So 0, okay, that's nothing there. 1, okay, great. So this selector specificity is one class, and its specificity is 0, 1, 0. Now, your browser prioritizes values, numbers that are to the left-hand side. So if I go mouse over this ID, it says the selector specificity is 1, 0, 0. So if you look at this selector, which says it's 1, 0, 0, and this selector, which says it's 0, 1, 0, the leading number is bigger on this ID. So this is the one that's going to win. So if there's a conflict where it says, color is red, and here it says color is green, then what the browser is going to do, it's going to make it green because this the specificity of this selector is higher. In this example, it was very easy to find this. And just to kind of drive my point home, if I write another selector, if I say my ID, and this is actually kind of funny, if I duplicate my ID twice, right? This is completely valid, still valid CSS. And when I mouse over this, you can see that my selector specificity is now 2, 0. So following that rule, the first number is 2. The first number in this one is 1. So that means that this selector is going to win out. So if I change my color to say like purple, then that means now the color for that element is going to be purple. Okay, so specificity can get out of hand, especially when you're writing a whole bunch of CSS that modifies your entire page. So how do we normalize or make the specificity of our document predictable and more or less the same? Well, the way that we do that is we use Ben.